Okay, so I just barely finished watching the Apple event, and there were many huge things announced today. And in this video, I want to go over the new MacBook Pros and what does this mean for someone who makes films, and what does it mean for anyone in the video-related industry? How are these products going to change the game? Okay, so today Apple announced the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. They announced two new chips, one called the M1 Pro and one called the M1 Max. So these are two higher iterations from the M1. So the M1 Pro has up to a 10-core CPU and up to a 16-core GPU, and with up to 16 gigs of unified memory. So unified memory would mean it's RAM, but the CPU uses it and the GPU uses it. And then they announced the M1 Max, which is their highest end M1 chip right now. It features a 10-core CPU like the M1 Pro, and then it has up to a 32-core GPU and 64 gigs of unified memory. So a lot of people are super excited about that because that means you get 64 gigs of RAM, and people were very worried about that in the M1 because we did not. We only got up to, I believe, 16 gigs of RAM, which is not very good. One of my favorite things, they brought back the ports. So you have HDMI, SD card slot, and Thunderbolt 4. And they also brought back MagSafe, which includes fast charging, which is really great. So you can charge using the USB-C if you still want to, or you can use the MagSafe, which gets faster charging, and I believe they said 50% charged in an hour or something. So for the 14-inch, it starts at $2,000, and for the 16-inch, it starts at $2,500, and then you can go all the way up to $3,500 just in chips, just in advancing to the Max chip on the 16-inch. And they added 120 hertz, which is super game changing. I love 120 hertz. One of my favorite features of the iPads is 120 hertz. Oh gosh. Web pages, just everything feels more snappy. And then you can turn it down when you're like editing video and you want to see it proper stuff. They actually got rid of the touch bar and put function keys back, and they made it thicker, and it looks a lot like the 2007 MacBook Pro. And it's really, really interesting because I don't know, it looks super old school and I like it, but I kind of like the older computers better. I don't know. I mean, they put the MacBook Pro on the bottom of the case, which is cool. I don't know, I'm all for these design changes that make it look super cool. What does this mean for professionals who depend on these computers? The main thing that this is going to change the game for is power efficiency. So I've edited video on 16-inch MacBook Pros before. It's not great, and the reason is by the time you're getting into the video grind, your computer's basically dead. And so just like the M1. Now, we don't have the specs on paper yet, so once we get that, we'll actually know how it compares. But according to Apple, this is super power efficient, and they have these power efficiency cores to manage it. And what this means is you can edit more video in a shorter amount of battery life and a shorter amount of electricity needed, which is super great, which means you can finally edit on the go. Seems amazing. According to Apple, it also doesn't throttle. So a lot of PC laptops, you don't get the full GPU usage until it's plugged in. Whereas this, it says it's going to stay the same whether it's plugged in or not. We'll see how they compare to PC laptops once we get our specs, not the misleading Apple charts. And then they were obviously comparing it to the Intel counterparts. This is already much better value than you would have paid for the Intel 16-inch Pro and whatnot. And the 14-inch honestly is the one that caught me by surprise because they're finally having really high-powered chips in the 14. You cannot, though, get the 14-inch in the Max chip. You can only get it in the Pro. What it means for professionals is that they're going to be able to edit more video on these machines. They're getting more for what they pay for. They have better displays. They have better battery life. They have better keyboard. All the things that they were complaining about the past generations of MacBook Pros are here. This is like the golden age of the 2015 MacBook Pro, other than the fact it's unupgradable. But speaking of which, I think that for casual users who were thinking about gaming, personally, these specs are looking like people were already emulating games on M1, and that was the baby chip. That's the chip that's the person who doesn't know how to use computers gets M1. And people were able to run games and they were like, oh, this is equivalent to Xbox 360 graphics. Now, that's understandable. But with this GPU, the 32-core GPU, I really think there's going to be a new era of emulating games on a Mac. So in conclusion, basically, this means that this is the 2015 era of MacBook Pros revived. Great MacBook Pros, nothing to complain about. Not really anything they're really innovating per se. They're just adding all the features that professionals have been wanting for many, many years. So if you like this video, please subscribe and stay tuned for more Apple related videos, and I will see you in the next one.